Joining me now is Eamon Fitzpatrick and David Gazard. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Where is this debate at, Gaz, when it comes to the Middle East? Yesterday we couldn't even get a condolence motion agreed to on a bipartisan basis.
Well, you've got, I think, the coalition, which has got a fairly set view on Israel's right to defend itself and to use reasonable measures to get that done, whether it's attacking installations and pushing hard against Hamas, Hezbollah and maybe even Iran. And of course, you've got the unfolding problem within the Labor Party where there are domestic political concerns that are, if they're not driving the Labor Party, they're certainly part of the calculation. So seats in Western Sydney and in parts of Melbourne where there's high Muslim immigration and there's been high settlement. And of course, from my point of view, this is where the Labor Party finds itself sort of trying to straddle a fence and not really appealing to anyone. So you've got now a Muslim party that's fractured off that is going to be running at the next election. You're losing the right of the Labor Party. Obviously, it's strengthening the resolve of the coalition. So in a lot of ways, it's Labor locked in a bid to win Green preferences and not lose Muslim voters. I'd be interested in Eamon's view on this, but kind of alienating everybody else. And I think this is why Anthony Albanese has slowly had to change his line on this issue to be more supportive of Israel.
The Prime Minister reiterated when I put to him this quote by the State Department that they support Israel's right to have incursions in the southern Lebanon and degrade Hezbollah. He says, he didn't say those same words, but what he said was, I support Israel's right to defend itself. He then says that there should be a ceasefire. The two things don't necessarily... It's hard to see them both happening at the same time. A ceasefire, yet Israel's right to defend itself. But at the same time, Mr Albanese says he's consistent with what the G7's saying and with what the United States is saying. Does that all marry up?
Well, I think it does. I think he's been consistent the whole time, as we have as a nation. I think the points that Dave raises, absolutely, Gaz is talking about something that comes right down to it, which is what is playing out here at home. I don't think there's any doubt whether it's Penny Wong or Anthony Albanese, what our position is globally. That's never in doubt. But it is what is happening here, the scenes we see in the Parliament. There is a huge political undercurrent to all of this. It means it has to be managed for the sake of community cohesion, for the sake of making sure people can go about their business and people can also have their say and do it in a very peaceful and law-abiding manner. I say all that, but I also say the job of the opposition is to apply that pressure. Sure, the coalition may have a view on it, but let's not kid ourselves. They are not beyond playing a game here. And that is exactly what's going on. And we're starting to see a bit of that at the margins now. People coming in, people applying pressure, people making all sorts of claims without any acknowledgement of a record of cuts to home affairs, cuts to some of those systems that we talked about. That is essentially the genesis in whether we scrutinise people properly or not today. So, let's just be real about that.
Let's get to the nub of this around Israel. And I think it comes down to sort of two things. Israel's measure of success is to fundamentally degrade its enemies on three fronts. The West's idea of success is to get a ceasefire. You can't support Israel's right to defend itself, but yet call for a ceasefire when those are two discordant things, because Israel says, well, if we give our enemies a chance on a ceasefire, they rearm. We have to take them right back to square one. We have to degrade their ability to function and to attack us. So you've got two different measures. You've got Penny Wong saying we need a ceasefire, but we also support Israel's right to defend itself. Israel's measure of success is taking these guys out.
And that's what they say is defending itself, because you can't have terrorist groups running the areas around your border.
I don't think anyone would say that they are in some way that they are not pursuing that at the moment. They have been the whole time, and they've been incredibly successul at it. I think if we look at all the coverage over the past year, it has been an incredibly successful Israeli military effort. I mean, let's be frank about that.
It has, but every time you get an Israeli attack, everyone calls for de-escalation and a ceasefire. Every time Hezbollah fires a volley of rockets in, there's crickets. So I think this has been one of the fundamental problems.
This phrase about proportionate response, how do you have a proportionate response when you have the despicable slaughter of 1,200 innocent people?
Correct.
What is proportionate to the sort of scenes? And I know many of our viewers, I hope they haven't seen a lot of the videos, because the Hamas videos at the time were the worst of the worst.
Live streamed, several waves, the most barbaric human atrocities that you can
So what's
consider.
proportionate to that?
And it's doubled down on that, Kieran, because you have an asymmetric pattern of warfare now where it is entirely legitimate for one side, the terrorist groups, to put weapons and to put soldiers embedded in communities. So to take them out, you have to be going through what are human shields. It's a war crime. You've got tunnels under hospitals. You've got Hamas centres based in a hospital. So anytime there's an attack on that, they come out and say, well, you're taking out a hospital. And that's duly reported around the world.
Can I ask you, where does this sit? And I know there's a lot of research out in the field right now. We're 6 months out from the election or thereabouts. Where does Middle Australia look at this issue? I know we're generalising, but the number one issue really for most people is still paying the bills.
You got it, Kieran. You absolutely have it. And it doesn't matter what your religion is or what your cultural background is. If you're an Australian and you are concerned about the same things every Australian is concerned about, how you feed your family, where are your kids going to live these days? Can you afford to put a roof over their heads? How are you going to get them educated? These are the things that actually unite us. Those are the things that are actually the priority for most people. And so for all the commentary around, oh, is this little splinter party going to break off and cause a problem with the vote? Is it? I'm not convinced.
You're referring to Senator Payman.
Sure.
She's announced for viewers who are tuning in, Australia's Voice is the name of the party.
Well, I mean, we were talking about that before. I mean, I don't know which Australia that's a voice for. Probably her own, to be honest. I cannot see Western Australians walking away from either major party just to vote for that when they're not clear, when there's no answers. Who they are, what they stand for, who's funding them. I mean, what about that question? Who's donating to them? I mean, all these things have to be answered.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting point about the focus of the mainstream of Australians who are obviously concerned with cost of living. No doubt about that. I would say there's been a fundamental break point over the last couple of weekends where you've suddenly had protests in our major cities with people running around mourning the loss of life of a terrorist. The importation of the security problems of the Middle East to Australia has fundamentally changed this debate, I would say. And that is something where immigration policy comes into it. The level of immigration from Palestine has come into the equation. But also it plays to the strengths of Peter Dutton in terms of his former cop, seen generally better on border control. So you're getting into a security, which is also important to Australians.
And he's looking pretty comfortable on those issues because there's not the same trying to please a few different constituencies. It's just one message. David Gazard, Eamon Fitzpatrick, gents, great to catch up face to face.